Welcome to the REI Diamond Interview, your source for real estate investment jewels of wisdom with Dan Breslin.
Welcome to the REI Diamond Show with Matthew Lesko on government grants, crowdfunding, and the shared economy and real estate like Airbnb. I'm Dan Breslin, host of the REI Diamond Show, and each week I invite another high-caliber performer to share their unique experience as it relates to real estate investing. This week, I am having the pleasure to have Matthew Lesko on today. I remember first seeing Matthew, as I'm sure many of the people listening in on this episode will also remember, the question mark suits on the TV infomercials as a kid, with Matthew Lesko jumping around and telling us how we could all get free money from the government, start a business, go back to school, pay off credit cards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's pretty ironic now that he has something that's going on right along the lines of what we're up to today, staying on the cutting edge of where the money's moving in the economy. So, armed with an MBA in computerized management information systems, paid for thanks to government money because of service as a naval officer in the Vietnam War, Lesko became a professor in computer science and started a career as an entrepreneur. After two initial business failures, Matthew founded his first company, which was a consulting business that helped Fortune 500 companies tap government programs to finance mergers and acquisitions and enter new markets. In a few short years, the business grew from himself with a desk and a phone in a one-room apartment to 30 researchers in downtown Washington, D.C. He subsequently left the corporate world to educate the average consumer on how they can also use the same government money programs to help improve their lives. He's written over 100 books on the subject of free money. 2 even became New York Times bestsellers. Matthew was also a columnist for the New York Times Syndicate and Good Housekeeping magazine. He's appeared on hundreds of radio and TV shows, made regular appearances on Letterman, Larry King, Leno, CNN, Fox, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and Oprah. His crazy TV infomercials were among the most popular in the industry, and he is often recognized on the street because Lesko is always wearing the question mark suits. Welcome to the show, Matthew.
Well, thank you, Dan. You got one on now. Walking around my kitchen talking to you. It's blue with yellow question marks. Don't leave home without it. Actually, it's probably the greatest thing I ever did in my life. Yeah. My cars have question marks. I got a little Mini Cooper out here with question marks on it. Orange Scion with question marks on it. You know, people can't give me tickets even. You know, cops pull me over and they just start giggling. You know.
So how did that come to be? I mean, can we have the story behind that and maybe
it was in me as a kid, you know, and I think that's what life all was, is life as an adult was trying to take off the shit that people put on me and bring out the stuff that's really me. Now you go through education and, you know, peers and businesses or jobs, and everybody's telling you what to be, you know. And after I got an MBA and started business, actually I have an MBA in computers back in the 70s, and that even failed. And thank God, I started 2 businesses the way they taught me, and everything was failing. I said, God, this time I'm going to have fun. So the third business, I thought, screw if I failed, because I found out nobody really cares if you fail. They pretend to care, but they really don't care. We're also involved in our own life. It doesn't matter. And so when I found out that, and I used to scare the pants out of me more than anything, that I would fail and couldn't face people, you know, as a failure. And that seemed to rule my life. And after failing twice, I found nobody cares. And so I said, boy, the last 2 businesses, I did not have fun because I was so afraid of failure. And so the third time I said, boy, this time I'm going to have fun. Because the worst that could happen is I fail. And I've done that twice. That doesn't mean anything. And at least I'll have fun doing something. So every day I can wake up having fun and not worry about some big nugget in the end of 10 years or 5 years or 30 or whatever it is that I'm working for. And that's when my life changed. I mean, and I have to keep fighting to do that. And that's what the question mark suit is. It's digging down further within me to bring what's unique and weird about me because that seems to be what I have the best chance of being successful at. Not trying to be like somebody else. I'm getting pretty philosophical pretty fast here.
Yeah, we're going down a rabbit hole, huh? So that's pretty interesting, and I know that, part of being successful is developing thick skin, as it were, and not being concerned with everybody's opinion. So it's definitely some baseline, just a great starting point there. So let's talk about the government grants a little bit, Matthew. I fix and flip properties. I buy, fix, and sell properties. My main business is selling to homeowners who are going to live in the property. And I'm a big fan of promoting home ownership. I feel like it's great for, our investment company's activity to then, provide something that's a component of somebody living out their dreams. And I've heard stories of other people who do similar things like me with first-time homeowner grants and things of that nature. I mean, from your perspective, it's just up to me like it doesn't exist. I don't even know where to find it. I don't know where to go. I don't even.
Well, that's the thing. See, I mean, it is, and Google to me causes a bigger problem than everything, because see, the stuff that's really good in our economy, the stuff that's given free, those people that give out that money have no advertising money. So if you want to buy a house or something and you hear the advertising, you go on Google, look for something, you're going to get people who are going to sell you something because they figured out how to get on the front page of Google to sell you the money, right? And because they're going to make money from you. The people who are giving away money, first of all, they don't have advertising money to let you know. And so you're never going to find them in Google. I'm sure if you Google right now, free money for housing or something like that, or housing grants, you'll get probably 50 million websites. I know that's how many you get for business for grants, 50 million. You're not going to live long enough to figure that stuff out. You go through the first couple of pages and everybody there, 99% of them will be people selling you stuff. And maybe the first pretty face you talk to will get you in. And then that will be your research. Now, what you're going to miss is all the stuff. The stuff that comes really, to help you do this are, there are three levels of government. Your state, your local, and your federal. They all have housing programs. So that's why there's no one real place to go. If the one place, the only thing I can think of, the place for most major cities, or actually probably everyone in the United States to go, is calling 211. That's all you have to do. You want to buy a house. You're anybody in this country. Want to buy a house. You want to know at least, like particularly first-time home buyers, or even fixing up a house, something like that. So you have a house on. You call 211. See, that's a clearinghouse for all the people who don't have money to advertise. This is a nonprofit organization. It's usually part of the United Way or somebody like that catalogs all the other nonprofit organizations, that are helping the community in some way. Like I just wrote them up because it's a place if you can't get your sidewalk shoveled, you're old, elderly or something, you don't want to pay somebody $50 to shovel your sidewalk, you call 211 and there's probably some nonprofit organization to do that. You got to put a new roof on or something like that, and you don't have the money. Well, you should call 211 to see if there's a nonprofit, a government agency to do that, to help you with that. Now, it's not everything, but it's a good place. Now, the other wonderful starting place is your elected official. Now, it's even as a real estate salesman. I mean, say you have a couple making, I don't know what Chicago's area is. Say they're making $70,000 or something, and it's maybe enough for some things, but not for other things, and you're worried about what else is available in Chicago. Well, if I was a real estate salesman, from what I know about the government, I would call my congressman's office right away. That would be the first call I would make, because they will find the government agencies for you. See, what's neat about elected officials, they're really there to put me out of business. They don't know it. People don't know it. And they have a better motive than me. I'm trying to make a living, doing this. They're trying to get a buck, so they're not going to charge you. And this is how these elected officials are there forever, because most of their staff, if they have a handful, a dozen, 2 dozen people, a half to more of those people are just there to solve your problem of how you could use the government. And if they get you an extra 15 grand to make a housing deal, you'll vote for that son of a bitch no matter what he does, right? And so the more people they could get like that, pointing them to stuff. And see, what's neat about these elected officials, if you and I call HUD or any of these agencies or whatever, we got to go in the front door, wait in line, and all this kind of stuff. Well, the elected officials have a backdoor number. See, because even though you and I as citizens think we pay the government's, salaries or something, we do, but we don't make any of the decisions. It's the elected officials that make the decisions who gets the money. So that's why the bureaucrats are less interested in solving you as a taxpayer problem, but they're very interested in solving the problem as the elected official who decides how much money they're going to get next year. So that's why, they give the elected officials a separate phone number to call so they could call that phone number and get all their questions answered quickly. It's using the system.
So can you give me a couple examples, right? Because some of the challenge for me would be what questions to go in there and ask specifically.
You don't know, right? And that's why the problem is with any of these things is that you don't know. That's right. Never ask for grants because, particularly in housing, see, there's money, there's loans you don't have to pay back. So if you go knocking on the door and say, hey, I'm looking for a grant to buy this house or whatever, but particularly you say you're looking for people who want to live there. See, there's money that they loan you. As long as you stay there 5 years, you don't have to pay it back. Okay? So it really, it's like you don't know what to ask for. So you're looking for, the key word, I think, is financial assistance. You don't use loans, you don't use grants, you don't use any of those buzzwords that most of us think are logical, because you just don't know how the government does it, whether it's a voucher, whether it's you don't have to pay back, and all this kind of stuff. Now they have vouchers for buying houses, where they pay a percentage of your mortgage.
Wow.
And I just did a video on that, last week. I mean, that for people to get into houses. So who would ever thought, I want to, maybe you've heard of them for rental, but for buying houses? Yes. And that's why the biggest problem is we don't know what to ask for. So that's why you look for the clearinghouses of people who may help you to tell you what the kinds of things that are there in that area, and then you have to be clever enough to take that. Hey, that's really, I remember one of the first things that I made real famous called the Urban Homesteading Act, it was called. It still is. This is where the government's stuck with houses, that people bought and they just ran down and they're just terrible now. And so they give them away for $1, and then they give you 30 grand to fix them up, and live there. And I said, Urban Homesteading Act, who's going to care about that? Oh, these are houses for $1. So it's how to take what the government says, read that, stuff and say, hey, this is really an opportunity. And that's what it is, getting a list. And so that's why 211, if you just say, hey, like say you was a real estate person, you call 211 and I say, hey, I got this moderate income family trying to buy a home. Are there any programs that you're aware of or your organizations that help people do that? So that would be the thing at 211. And then also in your elected official too. You explain the situation, because if you start asking specifics, we don't know enough. It's sort of like you walking into a control room of a big TV studio and looking at all those switches there. But, basically they're all just make something louder or not louder or whatever. It's just you be stupid and general that this is the problem you're trying to solve. Is there something there that may help me solve this problem. Because then, see, if you give them specifics, hey, I'm looking for a grant, then it's easier for them to say no and you go away. See, if you're less specific, then they have to stretch their imagination. And that's what you want, because they're sitting on a pile of stuff they don't even know how good it is. And so you have to get them to have you peek under the covers, kind of thing, to see, hey, if there's some opportunity there. And particularly you in specific markets, once you do that once, you're pretty set up, to do that, because it's really your county government has special. And see, if these clearinghouses don't happen enough, then what I would do is go to the county, go to the city. If you have an economic development agency, they will have housing and real estate programs. Because even like commercial real estate, to buy stuff for business. So if you're in that kind of business, man, the government will finance half of that for you. See, all of that is jobs. So the two things in the real estate industry are most important to the government because it's housing for our housing stock and people to have stable lives, and then jobs for people to rent or buy real estate in jobs and that create jobs and businesses. So they're very important. That's why there's so much money, going into these things. And it will grow every year. That's another fallacy, I think, that we all live with because we see a headline, budget cuts or whatever. I've been doing this 30 years or something like that. Budget has never shrunk, no matter who's in town. Republicans never grow. It grows every bloody year. I mean, I keep track of how much money is just given out personally to people from the federal government. An average of $22,000 this year per family. That's how much we're going. It's growing. It's going to grow again next year. It'll be $23,000 per family. Last year was less. It grows every year, no matter what, because things are in law. They can't change them. They could bitch and nibble around the edges, but nobody's got the balls to really change it. And also what happens, so if they nibble around the edges, all the constituencies scream, bloody murder, I'm going to die. You're hurting me. And see, the politicians, the voters, that's what rules everything. So that's why if you're living off, not just saying you're a real estate agent, and your congressman gets all this money for real estate, and they start cutting these programs, you're going to go to your congressman and say, hey, you can't cut these. I'm out of work. I got 20 jobs going.
Yeah. So Matthew, you've watched this over the course of, 20, 25 years you've been watching these programs do they come and go? Because, like you said, I mean, my perception would be from big media and a couple headlines here and there, and I think, oh, God, they're cutting them. And I have to guess, and I guess I'm asking you a question, are we watching some programs get cut as others are being introduced, and that's keeping that $20,000 per family number still in circulation? I mean, is that kind of how you've seen this happen? Or
that's true. See, what interesting is almost anything you say is true with the government because it's so big. It's sort of like all of us, the good parts of us, bad parts of us. But you're right. I mean, certain things are cut. The problem is we don't cut enough and we don't put the new stuff enough. We keep dragging this old shit around and it stops us from doing a lot more new stuff maybe we should be doing. Why are we still giving the beekeepers or something like that? Well, maybe now bees are dying or something, but maybe that's a bad example. Right. But you're right. That's what happens. And so it's around the edges. I mean, the government is over a third of our economy. And that's why doesn't solve every problem. Of course, nobody can. Commerce doesn't solve every problem, but it's an important part and should be used, where best suitable. And so the people pro-government thinks it could solve every problem. People against it, think it could solve no problems. And so we have that battle. But that's what happens. And I think everybody and the elected officials say, oh, I'm against waste, fraud, and abuse, and nothing really changes. And it takes something systemic like, I don't know, we got other problems that loom bigger, and we're looking for things to cut. And so that's why we're saying, hey, maybe we ought to cut some of these people in prison. They cost a lot of money.
Yeah, I hear that. So what if, a real estate developer is going to begin research and try to figure out what type of economic setting? Can you give me a step-by-step
absolutely.
Could
if you're
take to research, that availability of programs?
Yeah, absolutely. I would go, no hesitation, call your elected official, local and federal. So you have state, representatives, you have, maybe county elected representatives or something. You want to touch base with all those people, because also what's neat about that, they have stuff in the pipeline, that you don't know about. Long term, they're going to do this over there, whatever that, and they're looking for help. I mean, they want, the more they have people in the community, they're supporting their program. They really want to hear from you and what you want to do, to match them in with what they want to do. Because they're just running around trying to get votes most of the time, and they don't really know what's going on like the rest of us. And we all think somebody else really knows what's going on. And it turns out to be the guy in Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They have the levers. They know. If you haven't done any of this before, you want to know the people who already have to know this stuff. Instead of doing all the research, they could at least point you to the sources or whatever. And it's not the elected official, to tell you the truth. It's probably their staff, their aide, or that secretary there that's been there 20 years doing this stuff, knows where all that stuff is. I mean, in bureaucracies, it's not the head guy who knows. It's just like the military. It's the sergeants that run everything.
Is it better to show up at their office or give them
absolutely,
a call, would you say?
Absolutely.
Show up?
I would just make an appointment, because it's all like when I was a professor, it's hard to flunk that kid who was in the office hours every day showing me pictures of his dog and all that kind of stuff. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. He seemed human. That son of a bitch, I didn't know who.
Kept calling or just called.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was easy to flunk them. Yeah, and that's what's neat in real estate, local. So much of that stuff is local. So go, belly. It's a responsibility for them to talk to anybody who's a voter. They have to. It's their job. Yeah. And if not them directly, a staff person, and they're just as good. That's what you want. So the staff person may even know more. Because once you learn from a staff person where all the bodies are, what's going on, then you could hit the big guy if you really need to. But initially, what you want to know is just where the bodies are, And that's open. Anybody. It just takes a phone call. It doesn't matter who you are. You don't have to be Donald Trump. Actually, Trump talks about it in his first book. And I used to, so many companies got their lawyers after me, and he never did. But I used to talk about all these big guys who got my H. Ross Perot and FedEx. They all started with government money, and I did commercials with that. And Donald Trump even, he brags in his book, his first $1 million deals with a government property in Cincinnati. And he still uses it. His dad was so good at it, he was investigated all the time. That's where his money came from. And it still does. I mean, every deal he's doing, because it's all about jobs. And development means jobs, economic development. And that money, that public money, is elected officials, and that's how they get power, because they, it's silly. You're not going to change the system in my mind. I mean, you can, but that's a different job. If you're trying to use it, then it's not hard. It's just, real estate, how hard it is. It's finding customers. That's the key. Just banging away, right?
This is cool because I think that, those couple examples you shared, and I personally am intimately aware of some financing details on some larger deals and larger in my businesses, $3 to $5 million range. And I know that for a fact, I'd say 10, 20, 25% of the money for that deal is coming in the form of a government grant, economic development, et cetera. So it seems as though as you think bigger and you're having more of an impact on the city, your market, your area, potentially the government money lever becomes more important, critical, and more of a reality, say, as you're trying to transition a neighborhood and put a grocery store in there or whatever the example ends up being that creates jobs. My final question on that, because I want to switch gears and get to the other topics we promised as well. Do you have any other examples, just so people are aware? Because I think, like, I know when I was a kid, you would jump on TV and you had the question mark suit and you were saying free money to buy a house. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you're basically going to fill out a form and you're going to get like a completely free house. But like, I think the reality of it, can you to just put it in a perspective as far as like a percentage of sale, a percentage of the amount of total amount in the deal? I mean, can you give me like one or two actual examples of money that you know was transferred onto?
Yeah, anything is possible. I mean, because it's so big, I could find a case, and there's who my infomercial is. Yeah, somebody got a complete $1 million house for nothing. So I can always find those and get them in the infomercial. The reality for people is what's most likely is down payment and closing cost money. Yeah. And that's especially for lower, moderate income folks. There's a lot. They're trying to get more people into that. Also, and so there's a lot of financing agencies that are trying to sell you stuff that you could call the government. The best place to start, is your state housing authority. Your state housing authority. So you're in Illinois. So what's that, Springfield? Is that where? The
yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. Okay, so that you live in Illinois.
Well, I don't know where the capital is. Is that what was funny?
Kid. Yeah, right. Yeah.
So you're the only one, Matthew, who probably doesn't know. Everybody else listening to the show knows. I grew up, I lived in Philadelphia, and I only moved here a year ago. So other than filing corporate docs in Springfield, it's the only. Yeah.
But that's it. They have a state housing agency. That's all their job is, tell you the truth, is get people into homes. You know, so it's finding a better interest rate to make sure you know stuff that's not advertised, to find out about the down payment money that's not advertised. Also, a great thing, if you have trouble with your, finances or whatever and buying a house, there's a lot of people that say they'll help you with that, but the government gives grants for free to experts to help you with all that nobody's looking to upsell you or sell you anything or whatever. They're already getting paid by the government to do that. And that's counseling offices by HUD. And the state housing authority would know that. So anything for the average citizen looking to buy a home, that definitely is the place. What you'll miss from there are the smaller programs from nonprofits that may not be hooked into that. And that's where the 411 comes in.
211.
Oh, that's right. 411. No, did I say Springfield? I mean,
you did. Yeah, you did say 211, right?
I know. I'm sorry. I meant 411.
All right. Cool.
No, I'm sorry. No, it's 311. What did I tell you? I said 411. I said, but actually, some states it's 211, 311. They do 311. That's better. Some counties have their own 211. It's all screwed up. 311. And if you think I'm an idiot, just call your librarian. They know.
Got it.
That's another great source people don't realize. Man, the reference librarians, but they'll do it over the phone, Skyping, instant messenger and everything. And they're really hit into these local sources that people, don't really know. I mean, there's a lot of old time stuff that's really, they even help you, the libraries that will sit down with you and help you set up a store on Etsy so you can have your own store, set up anything you have trouble with on the internet. I mean, it's great stuff people forget about. I'm sorry.
I checked it out. 211 will give you, the information, national resource and information hotline. 311 is like a city services. So if you need to, report a traffic light. Yeah. Okay.
So 211.org is also online. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I just noticed that. So we got that cleared up. So let's talk about the crowdfunding thing. I actually had another expert recently on the show about crowdfunding, and it was for some larger size deals. I have not personally done any crowdfunding yet, and it's not something I'm an expert on. So I'm going to open the floor and just have you kind of describe what you've seen going on and where you think this is going.
Well, in real estate now, there's a directory now online. You can probably find it easier of 1,000 real estate crowdfunding sites. I mean, it's just exploding. Crowdfunding in general is exploding to me for anything. You know, it's real estate, entrepreneuring, artists, or whatever. Actually, you've heard of Kickstarter. A lot of people heard of them. Well, just if you take that, they are now giving out more money for artists than the National Endowment of the Arts. They've been around about 5 years. That's it. I mean, it's just amazing to me what's going on in crowdfunding. I mean, there's a guy I interviewed here. I've done about close to 700 interviews in the last couple of years of people who have used crowdfunding or other shared economy stuff online. So that's what I think is more important than government grants. It's easier. I mean, see, most of the stuff online, crowdfunding, you don't even need a balance sheet. You don't need, they don't credit check. The big stuff, you have to be a registered investor, if it's, that kind of stuff. But on the smaller things, no, there's no paperwork, nothing. It's crazy what's going on. And there's so many, sites now locally. Like I would look locally, for like real estate crowdfunding Chicago, and just see how many sites are there, And I know another guy I've interviewed, he just has seminars going around the world about real estate crowdfunding. See, it's a way for the small guy to get in on big projects. I mean, that's what crowdfunding is for investors in anything. So now this is why, a couple of years ago, the White House made some changes, the SEC, so you can have a publicly held company and not go through the SEC, and so don't have to pay, $100,000 for all that legal stuff you have to do. And you could just get, like $1,000 from a couple thousand people, and you got a lot of money. And all that is almost unregulated. Yeah. And it's not like going through the big agency. So it makes the little guy not have to be a member of the country club to get in on big deals. Because that's what it used to be like. The next Facebook or something, when that goes public or whatever, it's usually inside stuff people know, but people using crowdfunding, then anybody could do it. People are raising millions and millions of dollars just from people off the street who are online anywhere in the world to do this. England is actually even more progressive. There are other countries that are more progressive on this than we are. Now I know there's a crowdfunding site in Washington, D.C. I interviewed a guy just for restaurants to invest in new kind of restaurants, looking for people who are, actually they were a bunch of, hotshot, high-tech people, always wanted a wine bar, and so they invested in the wine bar and said, we should put a crowdfunding platform for other people to invest in wine bars. Yeah. And they're doing that, and they're raising money for restaurant ventures, on a crowdfunding platform for anybody. So I said, I'm an investor in that, snobby wine bar, I gave him $100, whatever. All kinds of different ways. There's places now that on like business loans or whatever, for your little business, you got to pay rent every day, but you can't get a loan from the bank. There are crowdfunding sites. Well, actually, there's a loan site. It's not going. They lend you money if you get 50 customers say they'll spend money with you this year. They don't have to guarantee it, and that's enough to get a loan. There's new ways of qualifying people. I mean, like now, if you're a kid out of school, you can't get a loan for anything, right? You just graduate. Now there's crowdfunding sites just aimed at that because with certain degrees, with data, they're able to use from the Federal Reserve to show that people in certain degrees are going to make a hell of a lot more money than anybody else, and they're a good bet to lend money to, better than anybody else walking into the bank, it's had a job for 20 years. And so it's that criteria, so they're not going through the traditional banking system. It's just non-traditional banking stuff, and it's hitting real estate and everywhere. So that's why and it's easier. It gets out the current people that are in charge of all this stuff. I mean, they're going away. The banks are going away. Man, if I could go on prosper somewhere like that and get a loan for 6% instead of going to the bank and get a 12%. And then if I could lend money to that guy and get 5% instead of giving it to the bank for 1% and they're selling it for 12%, they don't have a future, I think, traditional bankers. I mean, they'll never go away. It's sort of like radio I said 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's still here in some form. But traditional financing.
Here's some of the challenge I have with it. So, we say, there's all these sites and it's this big, wide, open thing and it's exploding. But the reality is, at least in my experience, and we had David Postolsky, who's also a crowdfunding expert. He's an attorney and his specialty and niche is diving into crowdfunding specifically from an intellectual property side, protection of, other assets that are in jeopardy when you put your project online. So there's some nuances that David's familiar with. And I'll make sure I link in the show notes to his episode as well. So it sounded to me after talking with David that, in a sense, the crowdfunding platforms that he had talked about specifically, it's not a simple, easy transaction. It's not just bring your property up online and magically everyone just can't wait to throw their money in there. There was still a level of advertising, promotion, direct marketing. There was, creating a buzz, and there was an entire business behind actually raising the money. It was just like the crowdfunding site. I don't know if it's necessarily a panacea for a new investor who's just getting started, whereas you still have to be a credible presence in a market. And in a sense, they're just doing the transaction. They're just holding the money and they're doing the transfer and making sure everyone's paid back. That's kind of my perception on the crowdfunding.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. Yeah, I believe what you said, and that's really true. And that's true of everything. What it does to me is there's two things, is that one, it's an opportunity to fail, to see the market. See what's great on something like this, as opposed to you going around, and you don't know if there's a market or not. It's an easy way to test if there's a market, because if you can't sell it, whatever. So why go into Hawk or something like that you can't, I guess, responsibilities you're going to take believing yourself there's a market and convincing everybody when in fact there's not. But using something like crowdfunding, to me, helps you identify if there is a market. So it's sort of like the wisdom of crowds kind of thing. But the downside, right, I mean, if, you just put up a website and expect to, no, I do that all the time. So I've written 100 books and only 10 have made any money.
Fair enough.
And I think about this 24/7. I'm wrong 90% of the time. But it's a chance to play, and what is, to me, if it was just on people in New York, I'd have to convince people in New York that this was a good book. And they're not even going to buy the book. They're not a customer, So everybody's guessing what the customer will do. And that's why what's neat about crowdfunding, now I could go on a website that, I want to raise money. I want to raise $50,000 to write this book, and if I don't get it, well, that's the market too, see? So that means there's no market for this book, because what is on crowdfunding, like for a book, it's like pre-selling before you do the book. And so it saves a lot of time and effort, so I don't have to, write a book for a year and go out and sell it. Nobody buys it. I could find out if it's sellable and get the money ahead of time. And, oh, yeah, that's good. People want it, and go do it. So that's what's cool about crowdfunding. There's that instant market study. It's a two-step process. You get the money and the market at the same time instead of trying to dig up the money, hope there's a market, and have another chance to fail. So failing at first on both is sort of a bigger cycle, a best cycle, because we're all guessing. Nobody knows what the hell works. And that's why, to me, even though, I think you're right about, it's not a panacea yet, but it's like anything. It's a thing to watch. You don't know. It's like the first cars, or like Airbnb. I'm sure the hotelers are not worried about Airbnb. They'll still be here. Hyatt will still be here for 30 years, right? 50 years or whatever more it's going to be. But Airbnb has been around for 5 years. They're basically a website. They have about 2,000 employees. Hyatt Hotel's been around 50 years. They got like 100,000, 200,000 employees, all that property or whatever. Airbnb's value is bigger than Hyatt. Airbnb, the value of that business is bigger than Hyatt Hotels, and they don't own anything but a website, and they have no employees. But there's 1 million people making money from Airbnb. You know what I mean? Like, I have a little apartment downtown, Washington, D.C. We don't use it all the time. We put it on Airbnb. Man, it's just amazing. And see what that does with those Airbnb. If I wanted to rent my apartment, then I have to do all the bullshit in the middle, right? I have to check on the people. I have to put the ad on, you know, wherever, Craigslist or whatever, event them, worry if I get paid, worry if I... The people who use Airbnb, when they leave, it's cleaner than when we gave it to them. There's something about when you're using somebody else's thing that you have a personal kind of relationship with versus Hyatt. I go to Hyatt and I trash the room. I don't give a shit. Neither does Hyatt. It's once a month, right? I go to Airbnb like I used it in Shanghai, and man, I'm vacuuming, cleaning, and everything. Because this lady who runs the Airbnb also got me to give a speech at a startup group in Shanghai. You know, that's a concierge. That Hyatt could never do that for me. You know, it is just an incredible experience. But it's what's happening. Like, we have a guy in our Airbnb now who's singing at the opera in the Kennedy Center. I had dinner with him. He's a terrific guy. He was in a rock and roll band, a grunge band in Seattle, and was taking voice lessons because he was the only guy in the grunge band who could sing. And the voice teacher said, "Oh, you ever try opera?" And he got hooked on opera, and now he goes around the world singing opera.
That's cool. So can we talk about your process? Like, you know, all right, give us an example for me. Do you have a doorman in that apartment building?
No.
So who actually has to meet the person over there? Is that something that can be like?
Well, actually, we don't even have to. We send them the keys. It's all done online. Everybody's vetted online. Everybody gets paid ahead of time online. I got money before the guy shows up. Yeah. The only thing I have to do is clean afterwards, and that's very little because it's remarkable. Now, here's another opportunity. If I was a real estate person, I think there's a great opportunity here. It's done in some cities now. Is, you know, people who have empty apartments, empty houses, whatever. You can, all it does is, you know, these platforms, as they call them, websites, you know, are easy because they're supposed to be for everybody. It's sort of like, you know, automobiles were a pain in the ass to drive. You had to be a technician to do it first, but eventually it got easy. Well, the same way with these websites, it's getting real easy. It's a cut and paste. And you put it on for these people who own these properties and rent it on Airbnb and split the money with them. Yeah. As a real estate person, you're used to doing that kind of stuff, right? Even getting a clean handmade service of you.
I did the math, and I'm like just trying to figure that out too, right? So I don't know if there's a viable business plan there or not, and I know that there's a lot of people listening to the show who've had that same question, and they're doing. So if I have an empty unit, I guess I'm probably looking at a $10,000 capital cost up front to furnish the unit.
Oh, if nothing's there, yeah, right.
Yeah, and then I would have the management. So someone's got to go by and clean, or somebody's got to go by and drop the key off. I mean, what if the person doesn't leave? There's, you know, some risk of that kind of thing going on. So I don't know that it'd be like completely passive. It'd be certainly an active investment. So
if it's temporary, that's different. You know, if you're temporary, then you're right. I don't know if it's worth furnishing, but maybe it is. I mean, people in Chicago is a different city. See, people in San Francisco, because extensive, are renting space in their backyard to put up a tent. I mean, there's a way to do this cheaper, but if I think it may make sense for you more if it's longer term. You have property, boy. I mean, you're thinking how to make money on it, but there may be more money in short-term leasing and furnishing it in the long term than in, you know, whatever else you're doing, kind of thing. But to me, it would make more. You know, it's something we want to use our stuff for. You see, you put it on for only certain days. It doesn't have to be available every time. You decide when it's available, and it comes up. You know, when people are looking to live, or people go on vacation. Hey, you're going to be on vacation. Yeah, I could probably get, $3-4 grand from your house, and I'll split the money with you, and I'll take care of it. There's things like that. People.
So how much do you get per night on that unit that you have right now?
Oh, it's a 1-bedroom apartment, and we get, I think it's up for like $100. Smiley, what's the daily? $130 or something like that a night.
And how many nights in a month is that going to be occupied?
Oh, well, right now it's 3 months worth, And we do very well.
Oh, he's going to be there for 3 months straight, huh?
Yeah, but we were doing better. We give him a deal for 3 months, but we were doing better when it's just fly by night, So we could.
And would it be occupied every night, or would you have, 5 days
most
a
of
month?
actually, last year I think we made 15-20 grand on it, and it's paid off. So the apartment we've had a long time. I came back from Shanghai after staying in an Airbnb. I said, God, why don't we use our place? And we just put it on, and again, it costs nothing. See, but again, if you have to invest in 10 grand, well, then you don't know.
Yeah, then it's kind of if you already have it. Yeah, maybe not a long-term business
even
plan for scaling.
Right. But other people, see, there's also a business in managing other people's Airbnb. So other people, in other words, you have people have their condo that, they're going to Florida for 3 months a year, whatever. You want to make some money on that, as a way, or your house in the suburbs there, because people who come for short times, instead of the other kind of monthly rental stuff. See, but there's obviously something going on here. If they're growing that quickly, it seems to me that in our society now, the things that are increasing the value have no property. Uber's worth $50 billion now. Even if you're wrong and it's only 30 or even 20, whatever you say, that's only 5 years, and that's worth more than Avis and Hertz together. And again, only has like 2,000 employees, but there's all these people making money from it.
And that's what's meant by the shared economy, right?
Right, exactly. So we're sharing. So why build a hotel when we got all these empty rooms nobody's doing? See, people just, an extra room in your house, anything. So maybe it's also to put in your hat as a real estate investor, people are trying to figure out how to pay for a house. Well, here in this neighborhood, you're near a college or whatever, you could probably Airbnb this, and so you don't have anybody long term, but get extra income from the house easily and just when you want. See, that's the other thing. Traditional stuff is like a traditional job driving pizza. So you got to go to the pizza shop, every day the guy wants you, right, from 9 to 5 or whatever it is. Now on Uber, if you want to make extra money, you just clock in whenever the hell you want and say, I'm available. You don't want to, you have nobody to report to, no boss or anything. So that's what's neat about the shared economy is that you're in control. The traditional economy is the boss is in control. And so you're just sharing when you'll do that work when you want to. If the price isn't right, screw it. Yeah, so all that stuff is exciting. And these are fastest growing things in our country right now. I don't know anything else growing like that in 5 years to be worth 20 billion, 30 billion, and with no employees. Yeah,
it's pretty wild, pretty changing times.
Yeah, and I'm sure real estate.
Here. So I was going to see, could you name for us 2 or 3 life-changing books, Matthew? Either real estate, business, or mindset.
Mindset. Actually, I run every day, like 5-6 miles, and I listen to books a lot, and they're good for running. Besides, I try to learn Mandarin. I'm up to about 7 words in 3 years. So there's a great book out called Wrong, Why Experts Keep Failing Us and How to Know When. And this is a great book. And I think what's indicative of what's going on in our society. We all want experts. We all want to believe in an expert, and we want somebody to give us the answer for anything. We'll pay a lot of money. This is really showing you the other end. What they did is they have an analysis of all, like in medicine, all the New England Journal of Medicine, all the big research journals. So this is the best research that's done in the world. 2/3 of that turns out to be wrong within a few years. So all these headlines that you read about anything, is wrong. The smartest people doing the biggest research are 2/3 of them are wrong. I mean, that's amazing. And see what happened, at least personally, that's why I think that's indicative of a lot. I mean, look at the smartest people on Wall Street. They crashed the whole world. We got the biggest brains in the world going there. And they were wrong. And everybody, judging the market, there was 99%, said, oh, it's not going to fail, and it did. And the others probably just finally got it right.
The smartest ones walked off with a lot of money.
Yeah, and or the lucky ones.
I guess you could say that.
But it looks like, this is what we rely on experts. And what I think this tells us is that we have to rely on our gut more. Because the experts are guessing. I mean, just like what you're trying to, I assume if you're thinking that you're not sure what the hell to do in life, you're guessing. I am. I have not. I've been writing books for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I still don't know what the hell to do. So I'm guessing every day. But we want to go to experts and tell us what to do. What is it? Trying to get the magic, and we pay a lot of money. So what I'm trying to do is get people to hey, 2/3 of the time, probably the guy's going to be wrong, and you're really going to trust yourself. And I think yourself is more important, because if you take somebody else's advice, then when it doesn't work, you just say, oh, that guy's an asshole, And the biggest thing in life is failure. You're going to fail most of the time anyway. And you have to learn from that. So if it's your own judgment you fail at, you're going to get more out of that than somebody else's judgment, and they're guessing just like you are. So you might as well take your own, and also your own stuff is more fun to work at. Your own stuff is going to be, you're going to work harder at. You got to invest an interest in it. The first bad turn, on something else, you say, this is terrible. Somebody suggests something, you don't think so, but he says it's great. You do, oh no, this smells bad, whatever. And you're out of there and you don't give it enough chance. But if you do your own analysis and your own gut instinct and follow that, you have the energy, the courage, or whatever to get through the hard parts. Everything is hard. And also, that's more fun. And I think the object of the game is having fun in life. And so why do something that you're miserable at to have fun 10 years from now, 5 years from now, when you could be having fun today? That's the key. Even if you fail, what the hell? You're having fun. You won already. You don't have to wait. Don't wait for the payoff. Have fun today.
Do you have any final jewels of wisdom you'd like to share with our listeners, Matthew?
Wow. Oh, God. Nobody knows what they're doing. And I found at my age, I'm 72 years old, I feel I try to run, I'm not as fast as anymore, I don't play golf, can't hit the ball anymore, whatever. But I could love. And I think the one muscle that you could grow the most in life is your heart, loving. Man, and that's the most rewarding thing in life, I think. And we don't train, we don't practice that. We're all tied up in some other shit, And I think we're here, it seems to me, in life to give. And how much can you give before you die? Profound enough. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm guessing, but that's my best guess.
All right, writing it down. All right, Matthew. So how can people get more information about you, any contact information, URLs?
Yeah, I got two. One called grantsandcrowdfunding.com, and the other is lescovideoebook.com.
All right, I'll make sure I add those in the show notes there.
Okay.
I thank you for coming on the show today, Matthew. I had a good time here. Got a couple pages of notes.
No, it's all. And you're going to do well on the quiz. Great.
Yeah, true enough. Cool. And thank you all for tuning in to the REI Diamond Show. Do you know anyone else who's investing in real estate or wants to begin investing in real estate? Do you think they'd enjoy this episode? You should send them a link. Also, if you're interested in receiving a free download of my book, Become a Wholesale Real Estate Master, go to reidiamonds.com. That book is basically the how-to business plan for my own real estate business, Diamond Equity Investments. The website, again, is www.reidiamonds.com. Thanks again for listening. Dan Breslin here. I'll catch you next time. Remember, here at the REI Diamond Show, we're dedicated to increasing and protecting your net worth.
Thanks for listening to the REI Diamond Interview. To receive the REI Diamonds newsletter and interview monthly, sign up now at www.reidiamonds.com.